Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
SCTV's live coverage of Falmouth Select Board meetings is brought to you in part by John's Liquors, 729 Main Street, Falmouth, 508-548-2287.
Good evening. I'd like to open the meeting of the Falmouth Select Board. It is Monday, November 4th, 2024, and it is exactly 6:30. And I'm going to ask that everyone please silence your cell phones and double check that indeed they are shut off. And if anyone is audio or video recording this open public meeting, please notify me as the chair. Thank you, and I would ask that you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, any recognitions from the board?
Well,
Ms. Goldstone? Oh, I'm sorry.
A quick recognition of the generosity of Donald Smith and Pamela Burke Smith for their donation to the YMCA, which is really going to move that project along, which is excellent.
Here, here. That's pretty incredible.
Thank you. Mr. Scally?
more in the nature of an announcement, but I was at the opening of the apartments at Main and Scranton tonight, as was Mr. Johnson Staub, and you were as well. What a wonderful project, and kudos to everyone in town that really helped make that a reality, because it's a wonderful project for our seniors. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anything else from the board?
No.
Okay, we're going to move into announcements. Any announcements from the board?
Election day tomorrow.
Yes, everyone get out and vote. Okay, then we're going to move right into public comment. Public comment may be made on routine matters not on our agenda this evening. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Please introduce yourself. And since the matter has not been included on our agenda, the Select Board will not participate in any discussion or debate of your topic. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will welcome the Planning Board.
Thank you. We're glad to be here. I understand it's a new process for just about everybody here, so we'll see how that goes. The first thing, I'm opening the Planning Board section of this meeting, and I want to thank the people who applied to join our Planning Board. That really shows a great commitment to this town, and I appreciate it. It's nice to have choices and such good, well-qualified choices, so thank you. The way this will work is each of you will come forward to the microphone, introduce yourself, say an opening sentence about why you've applied, what drew you to do that, and then be open to questions from any one of us, in no particular order, as they occur to the people who are here. I think for the order of the people who are going to appear, it looks like the easiest thing to do is to take you by how close you are to the microphone. So, Mr. Zine, if you would step forward, please.
Thomas Zine, East Falmouth. Good evening, Madam Chair, Select Board members, Town Administration, Council, Madam Chair, Planning Board members. I actually prepared a 2-minute statement. Can I read that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm seeking an appointment on the Planning Board. If you had a chance to glance at my resume and application, you'll notice I have my construction supervisor license. I served in the military, and I worked in the criminal justice system. In all 3 of my occupations, it was imperative for me to know the rules, regulations, and laws. But more importantly, understand how to read through them and know where to look to find the answer. As a builder, I have hands-on experience working with plans and building from the ground up. As an investigator for the state, I was a fact finder. It was important for me to pay attention to the small details in order to form the bigger picture. I see the planning board in a similar way. I continue to read and stay informed on the topics. I've read through all 6 town warrant articles that have been recommended by the planning board for town meeting. Other important topics the planning board is presently dealing with include short-term rentals and workforce housing. This is a lot of information for a new planning board member to absorb. But with my proven work history, I can multitask and handle this type of workload. I want to also mention I serve on other local boards and committees. These meetings teach me to be a good listener. But I feel like I picked up my listening skills at an early age because I grew up the middle child of 7. And there were lots of opinions at our dinner table that I learned how to negotiate. I'll end with this. The vision of Falmouth is changing as we move forward. But as a potential planning board member, I see there's a balance between progress, which we need, and not letting go of Falmouth's old charm. Thank you.
And before we get to questions, I just want to mention 2 things. One, Mr. Baldwin withdrew from this process, and 2, the chair has taken people out of order. And I just want to make that note, that the way our agenda, we had them listed differently, which is fine. But I want to make a note that it is out of order. Questions from the board of Mr. Zine?
I'll just to confirm, you have been attending planning board or viewing planning board meetings?
Yes, I've attended the last planning board meeting, and I've viewed the last few. And throughout the year, I've actually viewed probably about a dozen.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the select board? Ms. Goldstone and then Mr. Muscali?
Yes. The comprehensive plan is the purview of the planning board, and I'm curious if there was one thing about our current comprehensive plan that you could add, change, what would that be?
Probably continue to work, I think not add, but just continue to work towards our workforce housing issues and our, yeah, I think just workforce housing would be what I would just continue to move in that direction. And actually, having read some of the amendments, I think some of the changes in the language has been really important, and I think that's going to assist us in getting there with the accessory apartments versus the ADUs. Structure changes, language is changing there as well, along with some of the home-based businesses.
Mr. Muscali?
Yeah, Mr. Zine, and I'm going to ask the other 2 applicants as well, but as you know, this is an appointment until May of 2025,
Yes, sir.
and then there's an election. Have you given any thought to what your intentions would be for that election that would be coming up?
Yes, I would run again for that. It would be a year, and then run again if and when I am sitting in that seat. I would run again for the 3-year seat as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the select board? Go ahead.
Mr. Zine, what is your opinion of redevelopment of existing infrastructure that we have with respect to affordable housing and?
I know I've talked about it over the last year. I think repurposing is a vital part of getting to where our goal's going to be in this town.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the select board of this candidate? I'll move it over to the planning board.
Okay. Other members, do you have questions?
Nope.
Well, I'll start for us. Mr. Zine, you came to attention of the public, at least to me, for the first time because of your opposition to a major housing project. So that in that you were speaking as an abutter. The mission of the planning board has to balance interests. And I wonder how you would find a balance between residents and economic interests in the town.
I think just with that whole Saxon project, I just said it needs to be reasonable. I believe in affordable housing. It's important to continue growing. Like I mentioned, it's about progress. We have to continue. But there's also being reasonable and still protecting those abutters as well. And I think we can hit that balance.
Other questions? Pat?
I'm not sure I'm going to phrase this exactly right, because I don't want to upset a whole lot of people. But to do workforce housing and affordable housing, right now, the cost is kind of a laughing matter. People who are actually workers in this town that we have at Walmart, or even new incoming teachers. My husband and I met one who has to work 3 jobs. She's a new teacher. Cannot afford what's so-called affordable housing in this town. So we are going to have to, in my opinion, be innovative. And where do you come down on looking towards innovation? I think Mashpee has just started to do something there at the Commons, which is essentially like a boarding house to allow people to come in for Cape Cod health care. I believe I read that in this morning's Cape Cod Times. So how open would you be to letting your brain spin in these directions, knowing full well also that this is going to have zoning changes too, that we would have to sell to the public?
Yeah, I'm open to that. I'm a pretty progressive person, you know, even though I'm conservative, but I'm progressive as well. I think it all starts with the conversation and contacting other towns. You know, over the last year, I've spoken to people, other town boards in other states. How are they doing? How are they being innovative with their plans? And there's a lot of wonderful ideas out there that, you know, love to share, you know, sitting down across with somebody, having a cup of coffee someday, you know. Whether it's me or any of these 2 other wonderful candidates, I would love to have a conversation with some of the members on the planning board and share some information that I've attained over the last year.
Bob?
Could you see any way through changes in zoning that would kind of incentivize people to want to rent their property or change their property in order to produce more housing on existing lots and in existing houses?
Maybe tax rebates, I think, is a big one, maybe an abatement, but changing that, to me, I think is the number one. Because I'm a former landlord, you know, and I've rented in the past, and for me, that would be an incentive for me.
Thank you.
Paul? Any questions?
I have no comment right now.
Jim?
Nope.
I think we're all set.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Zion.
everybody.
Okay, how about Catherine Gray Sturrock?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have a short statement to read. I've lived or vacationed in Falmouth my entire life. My grandmother was interested in the planning process as she donated a parcel of land in the new Silver Beach area. My experience holding elective office on the Montgomery Village Foundation outside of Washington, D.C. is equivalent to being on the select board here. The population there is about 35,000, and it makes me very familiar with the planning process. The reason I put my name in to fill the current vacancy on the planning board was to lend a fresh face to the process. While I was not the person chosen to fill this slot, I support the person chosen, as he probably supports the need to update our climate change plan, which was last updated 5 years ago. I've reviewed how the planning board's current priorities align with the select board's 5-year strategic plan. And as seen by my resume, I'm certainly pro-business and support the parking and signage initiatives the board is contemplating, but we must assess and implement policies around climate change. We have the Woodwell Institute, advisor to many presidents, right down the street, and we should try to model our behavior on their findings and actionable recommendations. 16 towns in Massachusetts with populations comparable to ours have current climate action plans, according to DOE. Ideas like reducing carbon emissions by codifying the prohibition of clear cutting in our town is not complicated and highly effective, as the tree's biomass is nearly 50% carbon, according to USDA U.S. Forestry Services. I have sample legislation from other jurisdictions that planning boards in other areas have done and have achieved results. In summary, we need to engage in a forward, long-term thinking about how town planning can move forward and move us to a reduction in carbon, saving our town from perils such as erosion, storm damage, flooding, and the like.
Questions from the select board? Go ahead.
Same question I asked the last candidate. If there was a change, an addition that you could make to our comprehensive plan at this point, what would that be?
It would be in the areas of climate. And I have sample legislation that I would like to move forward. That would probably be my main interest.
Mr. Muscali?
Just a couple quick, have you had an opportunity to attend any of the planning board meetings up to this point?
I did when I first moved here. I attended a couple, and I wasn't really contemplating joining the planning board. I've been very active in Montgomery County in Maryland and Washington, D.C., and my profession required me to go to a lot of planning board meetings, so I was hopeful to retire. But again, I wanted to put my name in to get some fresh faces, because I feel that it's important. If you have an idea or a plan, you should put your name in the hat. So that's what I did, and I think the person you've chosen will probably fulfill a lot of these things.
And again, the same question I asked Mr. Zine, have you thought about running again? If you happen to have this position, would you be prepared to run again in May when the election would be up?
I'm not, I would, but the thing is, the position's been filled, so I don't know how to answer that theoretically, but I would be interested. My plan was initially considering a run for the planning board in the future, but this opening came up, and then I decided to put my name in the hat.
Mr. Brown and Mr. Zelinski?
I'm a little confused. What do you mean the person has already been chosen? Which person are you referring to?
I have the same question.
This position has been filled. And so that was, I think that may have been part of the reason the other candidate backed out. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. That's why
Okay.
we're interviewing here today.
You're here
Okay.
to interview for the position.
Okay,
The position has not been filled.
okay,
Right, it's a vacancy. Yeah,
okay.
thank you for clearing that up. That was really confusing.
Yes.
So
Mr.
I'm
Brown?
curious of, how do you think you understand the difference in zoning here in Falmouth compared to where you were living previously? Because I'm getting the sense you haven't been here very long except for the summertime. Is that?
No, I've owned a home here for over a dozen years. And I grew up here, my grandmother is from here, I was baptized here. And I do understand the difference between Washington DC and a town of 32,000 people. I've been living here and quietly observing. I'm on 2 volunteer boards in town now. So I've been quietly watching and waiting and listening to what people are interested in. So yes, everything from Washington DC can certainly, it's not transferable here to a town of 30,000, but there were some ideas, creative ideas around climate, affordable housing, and some other areas that are very, very important if we want to make this a successful and vibrant community. Having said that, I'm also pro-business because business is important to the growth of the community. So I am very impassioned about that.
I was actually referring more to the idiosyncrasies of the Massachusetts zoning laws. They're fairly unique.
Yes, they are definitely unique. I have a common road running through my property, so I'm familiar with some of the idiosyncrasies, and I do have some sample legislation that I'm very interested in reviewing.
Okay, good, thank you.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. Speaking over the planning board?
Thank you. I read about Montgomery Village Foundation. That's a very interesting setup. It sounded like Reston, Virginia, where it's a town that created itself.
No, it's a planned urban development, so it's different than Reston, Virginia in that respect.
Right. But it,
I'm not sure what the question is.
well, I didn't get to the question yet. But it comes from looking at that foundation and the varied housing that you have there. And I was wondering which among those ideas you will be trying to bring here.
again, I don't think that all the ideas from Washington DC are transferable, but I think some affordable housing ideas potentially are. I think any place that you've expanded bus routes or any kind of infrastructure is a good place to expand affordable housing units. But again, I can't transfer everything from a large municipality to a small one, but I can certainly understand the process.
That appeared to be part of Montgomery County rather than Washington.
It is. It's Montgomery County, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. A lot of people don't know which Montgomery County I'm talking about, so, or one is talking about when they say Montgomery County, because there are several in the U.S.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah. This is the same question that I had asked Mr. Zine, but let's put a different twist on it a bit, because as soon as you start, what you were saying is increasing housing, you're also going to be running into the problems of how do you provide for the climate, decreasing the problems in the climate when you're trying to increase housing. What are your ideas on that?
Well, you can increase housing not just by building, but also reusing existing facilities, so that's probably the main way. I'd like to look at that first, rather than layering on building structures and impervious surface into our current town. So I would probably say look at a lot of reuse. That would probably be my main thinking.
Excuse me, could you just pull the microphone over
Oh,
just
sure.
a little bit?
Sorry.
Just
Is
to
that-
make sure the folks at home can hear us.
Jim?
Yeah, I think you said you attended a planning board meeting. What was discussed at the planning board meeting you went to?
It was when I first moved here, and I just don't really recall the details of it. It may have had something to do with bike paths. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I mean, that would probably been 9 years ago or something, so.
Bob?
We've been all here for 9 years.
When it comes to, in the local comprehensive plan, we touched on coastal resiliency. Do you have any ideas that you could initiate that might push us towards doing a better job with that?
I think the number one area is, and it was alluded to in the 2009 plan, involves trees. And I heard, as Ms. Gladstone did, our speaker from the Woodwell Institute, and trees are really the primary way to go. And again, the earlier plan touched on that. So I think that any plan we can do to save trees, we have a tree warden, which I think is great, but we don't have any laws, any zoning laws that protect the trees like other jurisdictions do. So he's a little bit hamstrung, I think. But I think trees are the real way with their biomass of 45 to 50% carbon, that's the real thing to protect. That makes the most impact.
Could you give an example of a zoning bylaw that would protect trees?
Sure. I have one here. It involves clear cutting. And so, let's see. Town of Eastham prohibited uses, and they added into their zoning clear cutting, and they define clear cutting. They have exemptions from clear cutting, and they have penalties if they're violated. So I think that's a favorable thing to look at. But there are several municipalities that have these clear cutting laws. We don't have one.
So how would that pertain to a single house lot? Because now what you see is people going into a single house lot, clearing the entire lot and putting in a lawn. Is that affected? Could people still do that, or?
Well, that depends on the legislation. Most legislation I've seen involves builders doing small infill-style projects and clear cutting. In North Falmouth, as Ms. Harris probably has noticed, there have been projects going on where there's been clear cutting and then putting up units there. So most of this legislation would touch on that sort of project. As far as individual use, that's a really tricky area. So I wouldn't go after that first at all.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
just one question. There's several ballot initiatives on changes to the bylaw. Have you had an opportunity to look at that?
I've looked at some of them, and they were online and in the newspaper. And I think it's really important, as my cohort suggested, that you clean up a lot of the language, because sloppy legislation, sloppy bylaws makes for bad outcomes. So I've skimmed over that. I mean, it sounds very reasonable to do what we're contemplating on doing in terms of cleaning up the language.
Thank you.
Mr. Muscala?
Yeah, could you clarify what other organizations you're on? You said you were on the
Yes.
2 volunteer boards
Yes.
here in town?
Yes, Newcomers of Falmouth, which has about 700 members, and the Falmouth Garden Club, which is about 80.
Thank you.
We're all set. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. McCaffrey?
Thank you. Well, I'm not a new face. I have 50 years of planning experience. I have a master's in urban planning. I've worked mainly with cities and towns on coastal management, but other issues as well. I have come to know the town well, particularly since I've moved here full-time. My first summer here was 1942, but I've been here for almost 20 years full-time. And during that time, I've fully involved myself in town organizations. As you know, I think I've been on Coastal Ponds Management Committee, which developed some reports, one of which called for marine spatial planning, which we have not addressed yet, but may need to in the future. That's essentially the concept of developing concepts for zoning the water surface between active marine uses, conservation, preservation, and we developed a model of that for Green Pond. And it's there, you know, it's old, but it's still maybe relevant in the future. I have been involved in both the drafting of zoning and of other land use regulations, as well as the development of plans, particularly comprehensive policy plans for municipalities' waterfront. My experience involves both the substance of the issues that are addressed as well as procedures. My experience on the Charter Review Commission taught me a lot about procedures in this town and what's working and what's not working yet. I have represented the town on the Cape Cod Commission, and I was also appointed by the county to the County Coastal Resources Commission some time ago. I have been involved, as I said, in many committees as well as nonprofits, the West Falmouth Library, Highfield, the Friends of Nopska, and actually the Collections Committee at the Falmouth Historical Society. With the planning board has two major responsibilities: the enforcement of existing regulations within their purview, as well as the development of recommendations for changes in zoning and other land use regulations, and a comprehensive plan. As some of the questions that you brought up about that the others mentioned and you asked about were affordable housing. I think one of the most significant steps that has been taken is the planning board's change to the zoning 2 years ago. It's going to take time for that to work, but that's a significant way in which to get more affordable housing without directly saying that, but allowing denser development in some of our more urban areas. And their other proposal on, what is it? The
accessory apartments?
no, yeah, the
Multifamily.
Falmouth Plaza
Multifamily.
Oh, yeah.
rezoning. That's a significant approach for getting more affordable. It's going to take time for some of those zoning changes to work, but they're the right direction. One of the things I noticed recently, another issue that may come up, we've seen the sale of our major marinas. It's hard not to think that those new owners may not come in with proposals. I have extensive experience in the area of regulation of water-dependent uses and develop zoning and other regulations, so I understand that issue very well. I've also have experience in harbor management. Again, not directly within the purview of the planning board, but we need to begin to think a large percentage of this town is water. We go out to the middle of Vineyard Sound. We go out to the middle of Buzzards Bay. That's going to become a more important part of our society as we move forward, particularly as we address climate change through sea level rise, which is a major issue. I don't have to go into that. You're all familiar with the report of the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee. And there are still a lot of recommendations there that can work and need to be advanced. It's going to be dramatic changes that will happen in the land use along the shore. It doesn't have to be negative if we take our time and plan carefully for how we will adapt to inundation from the sea in some places. Some places we can protect, but we can't protect 95 miles of shoreline. And it can either become a wet wasteland or a productive area that features beaches, wetlands, dunes, recreational boating, all of the things that we make use of. We could look at it as an opportunity. We could have an enhanced waterfront if we adapt appropriately to sea level rise. So I also have practical experience through my involvement with some of the nonprofit boards I've been on. I was in charge of the restoration and rebuilding of the West Falmouth Library. I was in charge of the initial restoration of the gardens at Highfield. So I have some practical experience as well as policy and procedure.
Thank you. Questions from the Select Board? Ms. Goldstone?
Same question I've asked the others. What's one thing you would add or change to the comprehensive plan? And then I guess a second question, given your longstanding and varied involvement with the town, why the planning board and why now?
Well, I'll answer the last part first. I've been very much involved, and as of this summer, I went off my last board or committee. And I'm enjoying that. I'm really glad. But I do have an itch to still be involved. And when I saw this opening, I said, there's probably no position in town that I'm more suited to, despite all my other involvements, than the planning board. As a professional planner with years of experience working with cities and towns, particularly with local planning boards, mainly in New York, but on drafting zoning changes, comprehensive plans. That's why I'm interested in this. Well, obviously, a major area that would need to be added to the plan is, as we look at resiliency, how are we going to respond to the inundation that's predicted? One of the key numbers in the report that the Coastal Resiliency Committee did was, based on the state models, we estimated that by 27, 849 homes in Falmouth would be seaward of the high tide line. Some of those are going to happen not from the ocean coming further inland, but as sea level rises near shore areas, the groundwater will rise. And our two most impacted neighborhoods reflect that condition. New Silver Beach, where it was a filled wetland that was developed, and the neighborhood off Shore Road by the Surf Drive. That's wetland that was filled. They will experience the water surface coming above ground. There's very little ways to defend against that. But we need to have a vision of how we will create a better waterfront, even if it's as it's changing.
Questions from the select board? Mr. Muscally?
Just again, Ms. McCaffrey, knowing that is a position until May of 2025, and elected in May of 2025, would you be interested in running if you're appointed to the board now?
My first instinct was to offer myself to fill the term and see if there were good candidates that would run. I'm open, depending on my experience, to running, but I'm getting old. But I'm still,
Stay around,
I'm still
please.
engaged.
Any other questions from the select board?
I don't think I have any. I'm very familiar with Mr. McCaffrey's work, so.
Okay, planning board?
I'm very familiar with Mr. McCaffrey's qualifications for this position because in effect, he's been an advisor to the planning board for some time. He keeps track of it, and he offers his opinion, and it's very useful to us often. From your work on the charter, there were things that you wanted to repair the connection between the planning board and other places. Could you comment on that?
Well, one of the charter review provisions that was passed, and I've talked to several of you about this, was a requirement in the charter that the select board is to adopt procedures to assure that town agency actions are consistent with the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan and the capital plan. That, I think, can be very useful, but it hasn't happened yet. I certainly have experience in drafting similar laws in New York for municipalities. So I think it's important that that be seriously considered, that clearly there's been more progress in the town on relating things to the plans. But the charter now requires a formal procedure for that.
Could I ask a follow-up question? The comprehensive plan, although a few sections of it have been looked at and minorly revised, the comprehensive plan is dated 2009. Is it too out of date in order now to insist on the kind of connection that the charter calls for?
Well, much of the plan are policies and statements. Those are broad statements that are still very relevant. Some of the specific actions that need to be taken to further the achievement of the policies needs to be revised, but many of the policies are still very relevant, or the goals.
Thank you. Pat?
I think you answered one question, that you're not sure you'd run again at the end of this term.
Right.
We all see our increasing age and wonder, I think, occasionally. I've enjoyed your expertise over the years, and I want to say thank you for that. But that's it. I don't have a question right now.
Jim?
Yeah, I have two questions. Where's your master's degree in urban planning? Where'd you get it?
University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana.
And then in your experience in town, I know we all talk about prediction of sea level rise, but what's your observations in the time you've been here, the actual sea level rise we've had?
It's not a lot to the eye. I've been at Silver Beach all my life. But the frequency of flooding, because the sea is higher, is more evident. We're certainly seeing that. We nourish, so we're not observing it at times. We nourish our beaches on occasion.
That doesn't affect sea level rise, does it?
No, but we're not perceiving it. The sea level has
Oh, the
risen.
perception.
Yeah, the perception, which is important.
But that could be
Sea level
erosion,
has
too.
risen.
You don't have a number, you think the sea level has risen since the 40 or 50 years you've been here?
Yeah.
What's
It's
that?
it's risen a foot in the last century. More of that, and that's more of that So it's risen several inches in my lifetime.
That's it.
Bob?
No.
Paul? No, Pat, go again.
Yeah, I have kind of a follow-on to that, because the increase in height of the sea is also part of subsidence of the land.
Yes.
Can you
There are-
make a comment on that?
Yeah, there are several causes of sea level rise. The most important one is increased temperature. Water increases, and water, as it gets warmer, expands. There's the melting of the glaciers, Antarctic, Greenland. There's subsidence, we experiencing subsidence here, because as the last glacier pushed the land down and the land is rising, except at the end of the glacier, if you press on a balloon, it goes up at the end. We were at the end of the glacier, so our land rose, and now it's subsiding. Others are the gravitational effect of Greenland. As the ice melts, it will have less gravitational effect on the sea, releasing not only water, but it pulls the ocean to it, just like the moon and tides. The freshwater impact from those is changing currents. So the Gulf Stream may be weakening, and that will affect it, sort of pulls water to it. So it won't have the same strength. So there's several mechanisms that are going on that are leading to sea level rise.
Thank you, that's what I was trying to elicit, that it's not just a very simple thing.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Bob?
Question? Yeah. With the increase in sea level rise, how does that impact our aquifer?
There was a study that USGS did that. I don't think the aquifers, the sea level will affect groundwater near the shore. And the groundwater that's closest to the surface. It's not likely, I think from that USGS study, will affect our aquifers.
Okay, so it wouldn't start
No,
infiltrating
because it won't go
further inland?
It won't go further inland, and it'll affect mainly the near-surface groundwater.
Other questions from the planning board? I think we're all set.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to vote, and we're going to do a voice vote. So I will start with Ms. Harris. How do you vote?
Tom Zine.
Ms. Kerfoot, how do you vote?
Tom Zine, with a thank you to all of the applicants.
Mr. Dryer, how do you vote?
Can I make a comment as well?
Go ahead.
I want to thank the three representatives here, but as Mr. Muscali said, this is a short-term appointment. There'll be 3 opportunities for people to get on the planning board in 6 months. And I look at it as, how can we keep moving quickly without having a ramp-up of activities? And I've served with Mr. McCaffrey both for several years on coastal resiliency, on the charter review, and I would vote for Mr. McCaffrey on that basis.
Thank you. Mr. Fox, how do you vote?
It's a tough one. I'm going to go with Tom Zine, because I think we need someone that's going to be there going forward, not just for this one term. And that's really why I'm voting that.
Mr. Leary, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote for Mr. McCaffrey.
Okay, Mr. Drewley, how do you vote?
Mr. Zine.
Okay, Mr. Zelinski, how do you vote?
Sign.
Mr. Brown?
I'm going to vote for Tom Zine as well, but I would thank the candidates. This is the hardest part of the job, nominating, especially when you have such good qualified candidates.
Thank you. Mr. Muscali, how do you vote?
Tom Zine.
Ms. Goldstone, how do you vote?
McCaffrey.
And I am voting for Tommy Zine, and he is the candidate with the most votes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8 votes to 3 votes for Mr. McCaffrey. So welcome aboard.
So he will start at the next meeting of the planning board,
He's going
I
to get
believe
sworn
so.
in first.
Yeah, sworn in.
which would happen before the next meeting?
Yes.
He could go into the clerk's office, I believe,
Yeah.
and do it.
I'd like to thank all
Not
three
tomorrow.
candidates.
Yeah.
They're good candidates, we were very fortunate, and anyone can run for election, no matter who is appointed tonight. That's still open.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Congratulations.
And I'm going to send this over to the chair of the planning board to adjourn her meeting.
Okay, planning board meeting, I've got a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move into our public hearing. We have a fee hearing to discuss and consider a vote proposed for fee changes for 2025. Mr. Zelinski for the notice, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As provided under Chapter 119 of the Code of Falmouth, the public hearing will be held in the Select Board Meeting Room, Falmouth Town Hall, on Monday, November 4th, 2024, at 6:45 PM to establish and promulgate fees which are effective as of January 1st, 2025, to be charged by town departments and agencies, except as provided by MGL, School Department, Planning Board, Library, Town Clerk, Town Treasurer, and Collector of Taxes. Proposed changes are listed below. Nancy Robbins, Taylor, Chair.
Thank you, and I'm going to kick this over to Mr. Renshaw, please. Folks, we need to go on with our meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you all know, toward the end of each calendar year, town departments are asked to analyze, evaluate their existing fee schedules, and make recommendations as to whether or not they're adequate or need to be adjusted. The results of these departmental reviews and evaluations and subsequent fee revision requests are then published in the local paper as a public hearing notice, which was properly advertised, with a side-by-side comparison of present fees alongside any new proposed fees. Tonight, our Department of Marine and Environmental Services is going to be presenting proposed fee increases. One of the many factors driving these proposed increases with MES is that the fees being charged by Barnstable County for dredging services, as most of you probably know, have more than doubled for fiscal year 25. The fees increased from $12 a cubic yard to $26.50 a cubic yard, not including the pre- and post-dredge surveys that are required. The fee increases as proposed would increase the average monthly mooring permits by $15 per year and the average seasonal wharfage fees by $60 per year. Marine and Environmental Services is also proposing to increase some of the transient wharfage fees based upon their research through DACWA, which is the software platform, which indicates that our fees are lower than most marinas in our area. Even with these proposed transient increases in wharfage fees, we will continue to be on the low end of the fee schedules. Wharfage fee increases were discussed and approved by the Waterways Committee back on September 4th of this year. Madam Chair, I have our Director of MES here, Mr. Greg Frazier, to answer any specific questions you may have, but it's his recommendation and mine that the board approve the proposed 2025 fee changes as presented and published in the paper.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I don't have any questions, but I would just comment that I appreciate the written comparison of all the other towns to show that, as usual, we're on the low end, as the town manager said. And I haven't received any comments from anyone complaining that these fees are unreasonable.
I would agree with Mr. Brown. Any other questions?
Just a question on the wait list, if you will. How many applications are actually on the wait list at this time? A lot. But we
have multiple wait lists. Every harbor has a different wait list. But just for, off the top of my head, I would say, like, for instance, the Falmouth Inner Harbor slips have now over 200 people waiting. Some of the more popular harbors have close to 200 waiting. Some of the smaller ones don't, but the wait's longer. So there's no quick wait list anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any comments from the public on this application? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
You got the second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Discussion amongst the board.
I would move approval of the increases as a written motion.
There is. Yes, the motion to approve and adopt the 2025 revised Marine and Environmental Services Harbor Master Waterways fees as presented.
So
Is that your
moved
motion?
as written.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into the report on the Commission on Substance Use. I have you slated for 15 minutes, and I'm going to try and keep you to that.
And you got about 2 hours' worth of material in here.
No, we're not going to go over all that material.
There is a lot of really great information, though.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's mostly just for, your benefit to look at.
Sure.
Yes, please. That way I don't have to- How are you?
Sorry, I'm like dyslexic unless I'm standing in the right place.
That's all right. I'm familiar with that feeling.
And Beverly, don't forget to introduce yourself.
I won't.
Thank you.
So, good evening. I'm Beverly Costa Ciavola. I'm the former chair of the Falmouth Commission on Substance Use, having stepped down at the end of June. I was chair for 8 years, which is longer than anyone should ever be chair. But I so enjoyed, working with the commission, the commissioners over the years. I've seen quite a few come and go. Working with the Human Service Department has been a joy, made my job and the rest of the commissioners' jobs a lot easier. And I would like to welcome our new chair, which is Dennis Lyons, but he is unable to be here tonight. But he has started assuming the duties of chair as of July 1st. I'm not leaving the commission, but I really felt like it was time for someone else to step into leadership. So having said that, this last year has been quite busy, as was half of last year. So we had our first annual, what we're calling our first annual sponsored International Overdose Awareness event at the Village Green. We had a lot of community partners, Wellstrong, AIDS Support Group of Cape Cod, and Duffy Center, community health centers come to the table for that event last year. And it was very successful, so successful that we did it again this past year. And lots and family and friends of people who had lost a loved one. And that was really significant, a significant event for those families. In September, we hosted community focus groups regarding the opiate abatement funds. We had started out, if you remember, in June, doing a larger community conversation, which I think we had 60 people. But then as the new fiscal year started, we broke it up into smaller focus groups that we wanted to look at, like people in the Black, Indigenous community, school, people who had lost a loved one, families in recovery. So we wanted to sort of be able to look at all of those people individually and find out what were their needs. And then, we spent a lot of time reviewing those findings. We had formed a design team the year before, which consisted of a consultant that we hired, myself and Susie Hopman and Kate Lima from the Barnstable County. She was then the program manager for the Regional Substance Use Commission. And so we did a community engagement again and debriefed with some of the partners who had come to the table, both the families and the other providers. And then we presented our findings to you guys. I think it was in November of last year, this time last year. As I said, it was a significant piece of our year. But it really, and I'm not sure that, and I don't know if Susie will attest to this, but I'm not sure we learned very much new, but what we learned was that that people felt like they were getting heard for the first time. Like we weren't just taking what we thought we knew and applying it, that we were actually, and we did hear a few new things, maybe some things that we aren't able to do because we're a small town, but people got engaged. And we've had some of those same people come back and attend commission meetings, which is, really hopeful. So then in March, we had a 5-member team consisting of 2 Falmouth Commission on Substitutes commissioners, which was Dennis Lyons and Rick Corey, who's here tonight. And then 2, also some people from the advisory, your Human Services Committee. And so they looked at they reviewed all the applications that were coming in for the larger grant, which was up to $25,000. And then we told those people they chose, and then we have a slide that talks about that. And then in May, we supported the Celebrations After Prom event, as we have every year, I think, since the commission began. As I said, we really did focus on that process. We, started the timeline, engaging the community, and then really looking at how to distribute the grant process. Thanks again to Susie Hotman and her department for creating the grant application and sort of the parameters around that, because that was very, very helpful. And they have experience doing that, so it was good. And, we hope as we're moving forward and we start getting reports from the organizations that got the grants, that we'll start hearing also from the community as to whether or not they think that money was well placed. And so, having said that, the grant summary was $25,000 to Wellstrong for peer wellness, $18,500 to Behavioral Health Innovators to support their after-school teen recovery and treatment program, $25,000 to Duffy Health Center to support their mobile outreach, $25,000 to Parents Supporting Parents for sober living and support services for Falmouth residents, and $25,000 to AIDS Support Group of Cape Cod to support their community-based harm reduction services. As I said, none of these are organizations or programs that are new to Falmouth, but it allows them to build on them and continue doing what they already know is working for their clients. We have smaller grants that are up to $1,000. That's on a rolling basis. I don't think we've received any applications, one application for those. I'm hoping that what will happen is those small rolling grants will create an opportunity for really small nonprofits to come in and get a foot in the door, and then build on it and maybe be able to ask for one of the larger grants in the future. Our next steps, we just want to continue working with our town staff to prepare for the 2025 opiate application fund process and having go through again the review for that. We want to continue community engagement on a regular basis. We don't want what we did to be a one-shot deal, because then the community, the recovery community, the community that's affected by the opiate problem, they're not going to feel heard. They're not going to continue to feel engaged. And then plan for FY25 meetings and events. In our future meetings, we're hoping to, at least every other month, have guest speakers. We had 3 newer commissioners this year, Rabbi Elias Lieberman, Rick Corey, and Dennis Lyons, and it's been very helpful for them to hear from the community of providers as to what they do. So we want to continue doing that. And we want to continue inviting, like all of you, to come sit in a meeting and hear what we're doing. And I'll take any questions.
Questions from the board? Mr. Muscali?
How many large grant applications did you have?
8. And we, what'd you say we did?
Granted 5, was that?
Yeah, we gave out 5 and we received 8.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Brown?
I'm curious about the long-range strategy for the funding, and I noticed you've got 735 or something thousand, and you're only putting out 135 or thereabouts. Is that because you want this to be sustainable longer?
Because the amounts that are coming in every year can vary quite a bit. If you looked at the 18-year plan from the state, you know, we might get something in the range of 100,000 one year and then get something in the range of 60,000 the next year. So we wanted to make sure that anything that we were funding, we didn't want to just give these grants for 1 year, right? I mean, it takes longer than that to really show some progress.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure that that money was still going to be there. And it was our first round. We just wanted to be a little bit more cautious, a little more thoughtful in distributing the funds. But we have every intention of, you know, making sure that all that money goes where it's supposed to go for, you know, those families and the town affected. So, yeah, we're definitely going to be spending more of it.
I thought that's what you would say, I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, well, and I think that as people hear about what is going on with these 5, they will then say, next year we'll apply, and maybe we'll get 12 applications, and we can fund 10 of them.
Okay. And then, if I could, just one more. Could you tell me how the Duffy Health Center thing works? Because, you know, these are Falmouth funds, and they're in Barnstable, but is that to make sure that Falmouth people have access to their services? How does that work?
Yes, and they do bring their mobile outreach program here to Falmouth. So they have different locations where they set up the van. I know they've set it up at Learn to Cope in Falmouth.
Okay.
And they do outreach as well as open the van up. You know, that van is tremendous. It's got showering abilities. Does it have a washer? It's got a washer and dryer in it.
I hear a lot about the good work that they do. I was just curious how the relationship was.
Every Tuesday at St. Barnabas, so they are, you know, coming to Falmouth. I think that the review committee really did a good job of looking at, we want those funds to stay here. We understand that a lot of the organizations work across the Cape, but we want to make sure that what we're funding is for Falmouth residents, and I think they did a good job of doing that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Thank you so much for the work that you do.
You're welcome.
We really
Glad you
appreciate
do
it.
it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to the report from the Agricultural Commission.
15?
Yes, we have you slated for 15 minutes.
Stan Ingram, Chair of the Agricultural Commission. I don't have any slides or anything, so it's just a verbal. I think you may have seen our report that we submitted for the town, and that's basically what I will cover tonight. Very short and sweet and to the point. We spent quite a bit of time over the fall and winter, early spring, clearing some of the brush and growth off of the West Thompson Cranberry Bog, which the Conservation Commission was kind enough to allow the Agriculture Commission to work on. And weather was with us this year, and there was a pretty good cranberry crop. And so we opened it up for public picking at the beginning of September, and that ran, people could have picked right up until, I think I was out there probably last Friday, just before these last cold nights, and was able to still pick some berries off of there. So this year, we'll plan on going back and clearing the growth that came up from the trees that we cut down, cut the grass back down, try to work on some of the invasive vines that have come in, and hope for another good crop next year. The second thing that we worked on was we've been trying to come up with a couple of trifolds, one to talk about agriculture in general in the town, and the second one is to talk about the farms that are actually in town and selling produce. So when I came in, I saw some of these out on out in the corridor there. And if you haven't seen one,
If you'll give them to me.
Yep.
That would be awesome. Thank you, sir.
Right. So We did some crowdfunding, got a run of, I think, 1,000 of these, and we've put them up in places around town just to try to gauge how many we would need to print to keep it going all year. And we're going to try to finish up the one about the farms coming up over the winter and have it ready for the spring. And that'll be another trifold. We've been, as the Agricultural Commission, we have care and control. That was passed from the Conservation Commission to the Ag Commission for Andrews Farm. So we keep an eye out on what's going on out at Andrews. Happy to report, if you haven't been down to see the community garden at the end of Berry Patch Lane, that is probably a showcase garden, one of 3 of the community gardens in town now. And then the Farming Falmouth, which is a nonprofit, has their service garden down there, and they did a lot of donations that you may have read in the paper to the service center and to the veterans. So both of those have been doing really well. The AgCom worked with the 300 committee to clear up some of the language in the farm plan, which will allow it will allow us to go in and clear some of the growth in 3 of the fields on the south side of Berry Patch Lane that were used at one time to overwinter landscape trees, and then they were left there because it was cheaper to do something else. And so those trees have been growing for 15 to 20 years. A lot of them are in metal baskets. And we cleaned up the language in the farm plan, which makes it easier for us to go in there and remove those trees when we get funds or somebody willing to do that, and open those fields back up to cultivation on the town farm. So we're working on the field closest to the community garden right now, trying to get that ready for next year. Open up more community garden space down there. We are, let's see. So Farming Falmouth that I mentioned has a service garden down at the end, Berry Patch Lane. They have also are in the process of trying to purchase a site to call their own. And they have asked the AgCom to hold a conservation restriction if they are successful in buying that property. And so we have been working with Farming Falmouth, going over the conservation restriction, making sure that it addresses the needs of the town, and we'll keep you posted on how that process is going. Let's see. One of the things that always comes up at each one of our meetings and hits us hard is the loss of farmland to development, and mostly to 40Bs, because a flat piece of land is an ideal place to put up a development. And we keep brainstorming, trying to come up with ways to slow that down. And we haven't been too successful in coming up with an idea yet, but so we're going to work on trying to make an inventory of what we would consider prime ag land, those pieces of land that we want to put more of an effort in and trying to save, instead of trying to react to each development that gets proposed. So that's always on our agenda. And I think that's pretty much it.
Questions or comments from the board? Ms. Goldstone?
Do you have an estimate of how much farmland we've lost over the past 10, 20, 30 years?
No, not off the top of my head, but a lot.
Yeah.
And it keeps disappearing. There's another 8 acres on Locust Field Road that I think just got lost to a possible development.
Most of the developments are on old farmland, like even the Saxon project was formerly a farm. They didn't even farm the whole thing, but they farmed the first half.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Oh, Mr. Zelinski, go ahead, and
Do
then
you have any
I'll-
idea how much is left? I know that's kind of bumps off of Ms. Goldstone's question, but if you had to guess, what do you think's left with? I know we lost one of the biggest contiguous pieces, the last development on Locust Field. They cut that one right in half, so.
Yeah.
Any
no,
idea?
I don't. One of the things that did happen last year is we were contacted by the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, which is an arm of the USDA, and they had come up with a new land designation that they were shopping around. It was called Land of Local Importance. And they asked if we would like them to review the land in Falmouth to see if there were any parcels that would fall under their criteria.
Prioritize it, right?
Well, there's no regulatory power behind it. It's just another designation. So if somebody was looking for a conservation restriction, it would just be another plus box that they could check. And they only came up with 3 pieces, and not really big pieces. So we always think that we're going to have time to kind of inventory the land in Falmouth, look for the parcels that are farmable, and make an inventory of those, and so keep an eye on those, and just we're going to work with the 300 committee in Farming Falmouth and see if there's some way that we can stem the tide.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Brown, did you have a question or comment?
I know you're gonna wanna get some funding to print these eventually?
It's going to be on our Dear Santa list.
Okay.
Well, we want funding for the trifolds, and the other thing that we're going to look funding for is we want to put up about 3 signs on the major roads coming into town signifying Falmouth as a right-to-farm town, which was passed at town meeting a number of years ago.
Okay.
And that's just so that, trying to figure out a way to get the word out to people who are coming into town, may want to buy in town, that this is a right-to-farm town, and that your neighbor has the right to raise chickens or, put their horse in their garage instead of their car,
Okay.
that type of stuff. So,
Good to know.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay, we're going to move into business number 3, consider a vote to approve a groundwater discharge assignment agreement between the town and the Cape Cod YMCA, and I'm going to kick that over to Mr. Renshaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back at its October 7th meeting, as the board will recall, the Cape Cod YMCA representatives and attorney Mr. Kevin Clower provided an update on the project. Attorney Clower then presented the YMCA's request for the town to consider a land credit contribution via an assignment of groundwater discharge rights involving the town-owned parcel at 0 Brick Hill Road. Following the presentation, Select Board directed my office to work with Town Council and Attorney Clower to prepare a draft assignment of groundwater discharge rights agreement for the board to consider. As you all recall, there was a draft agreement in the packets back on October 7th. There were some refinements to that. The attached draft agreement has been prepared in collaboration between both Town Council and Attorney Clower. It's my office's recommendation that Select Board approve the groundwater discharge assignment agreement between the town and the YMCA Cape Cod as being presented. And importantly, Madam Chair and Select Board, if approved by the Select Board tonight, the signed agreement would be held in escrow until all of the required permits have been secured. And this way, if the project shifts in any way and requires adjustments to the assignment of rights, the Select Board can then revisit those changes.
Thank you. Questions from the board about this agreement?
Just a quick, any significant changes since we reviewed it previously?
I don't know, no, Madam Chair and Select Board Member Brown, no significant changes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Muscali?
Does the Y own the parcel at this time, Mr.
So the Y does
Fowler?
not own the parcel yet. We have it under agreement, and that agreement is subject to permits. So we are at what I will call the beginning of the end. We have gone through the Cape Cod Commission. This tonight is a big step in this process. We begin our planning board process next week, which will be followed by the zoning board. Assuming we're able to obtain all permits, then we'll move forward with the purchase. And I discussed with Attorney O'Keefe that this assignment, if approved, would be held in escrow pending both the permits and the sale.
Thank you. Other questions from the board?
I don't have questions, but I'm pretty excited about all the community enthusiasm for this project and all the support. And all
I will say that the news of a $10 million donation, I'm sure the board heard, was incredible, but put a lot of pressure on me. I was like, well, let's not screw this up now.
I think Ms. Goldstone called that out.
She
at the
did.
beginning of the
Recognition for that tonight.
$10 million is a fabulous contribution and a real accelerant, so.
And that was the owner of the local Valvoline that made that.
So is there a motion?
Yeah, I would move approval.
Motion to approve the assignment of the groundwater discharge rights agreement as presented.
Yes, ma'am.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate this, and we look forward to continuing to update you as this project proceeds.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're going to move into business 5. Discuss and consider the approval of a purchase and sales agreement for 599 Brick Hill Road, West Falmouth. Mr. Renshaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back spring of this year, representatives of the Jeanette Ann Robichaud Revocable Trust, which I'm going to refer to as the trust from this point going forward tonight, contacted the 300 Committee to express an interest in perhaps selling the family's 1.9 acre, approximately, property at 599 Brick Hill Road. Madam Chair and Select Board, the committee's Land Acquisition Committee screened, evaluated the property, and determined that it had a really high conservation value in regards to the protection of Long Pond and our drinking water supply. There was an appraisal conducted on the property, and that appraisal came back at approximately $262,000. The property lies entirely within the Zone B surface water protection area to Long Pond, which, as you may know, is defined as an area of land which must be protected to ensure clean drinking water supply. Importantly, the town's Department of Public Works staff reviewed the site along with members of the 300 Committee and concurred that the acquisition of the property would enhance the town's ability to protect the drinking water supply. Because the trust, the family, desires to close on the sale of this property by the end of this calendar year, and the fact that the town has to obtain town meeting approval for the property acquisition in April of 2025, and the town also intends to apply for Community Preservation Act funding as well as state drinking water protection grant funding. The 300 Committee has graciously offered to the town to make the initial offer to the family, to the Robichaud family, with the ability to assign the right to purchase back to the town. Madam Chair and Select Board, the town's purchase of the subject parcel, 599 Brick Hill Road, from the 300 Committee is contingent upon approval of town meeting and Community Preservation Act funding in the spring of 2025, as reflected in Section 46 of the agreement, which you have a copy of in your packet tonight. Town Council has worked with the 300 Committee's legal counsel to draft the attached purchase and sale agreement, and my office is recommending the Select Board vote to approve the purchase and sale agreement for the property at 599 Brook Hill Road as presented, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from the board?
Seems pretty simple.
Agreed. Do I have a motion? Motion to approve?
Motion to
Thank
approve the
you.
purchase and sale agreement for the property at 599 Brick Kiln Road as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, consider approval of non-union wage rates. Mr. Renshaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you all know, and included in your packets are copies of the three broad categories or groups of non-union positions that we're going to be talking about tonight in regards to proposed recommended wage rate adjustments. The first category is technical, administrative, and management, which I'll refer to as TAM. This group is comprised of year-round, mostly full-time positions. Think division heads, department managers, administrative assistants, information IT personnel. There are currently 55 positions within this group of TAM. The second category of positions we'll be discussing and proposing rate adjustments for tonight are the non-aligned. This group is 20 personnel, year-round part-time positions, and library substitutes. And lastly, the third category of positions we'll be discussing tonight with regards to proposed wage adjustments is seasonal. This group comprises of about 150 employees that do work year-round, including positions in the beach department, marine environmental services, recreation, and public works. Madam Chair and Select Board, I want to thank the Assistant Town Manager, Peter Johnson Staub, and the HR Director, primarily. They did a lot of research, looked at multiple factors, 5 factors, which you have included in your packet when evaluating these 3 categories of positions in terms of the needs to perhaps make wage adjustments. We looked at ability to fill vacancies in prior years. As you probably know, that has been a challenge for some of these positions over the years. We looked at step placement for recent new hires, whether or not we were able to recruit and successfully fill positions at step 4, which is mid-range or lower. Market adjustments provided to these non-union positions in the current years and prior years. Market adjustments that were received by other Falmouth employee groups for next year. And lastly, the 5th category was the ability to pay wage rate increases within the available budget for FY26. To provide you some context, when we examine the internal pay equity, as you can see in your packet, we, for FY26, we've successfully negotiated and approved 6 union contracts. These unions receive market adjustments of 1.5% or more for at least 2 of the next 3 years of the 3-year contract. For instances where there were no market adjustments negotiated, there was a larger market adjustment of about 10% for more within that 3-year contract period. The TAM positions received no market adjustments for many years until FY24, and that was a huge issue for us because it resulted, unfortunately, of having to make a large shift. About a 15% adjustment was performed in FY24 to kind of get up to speed. And again, we're trying to become more competitive in the labor markets and not fall into that pattern where we've fallen significantly behind in terms of adjustments. Most of the vacant TAM positions have been filled successfully, and that's a huge testament to the work that Peter Johnson Staub and Susan Lumping, our HR Director, have put into this process. In some instances, the starting step rate has been above step 4. So again, to avoid repeating kind of the past patterns where we fall behind, we're recommending for this TAM group a 2% COLA and a market adjustment of 1.5% for a combined increase of 3.5%, again, for the 55 positions in that TAM group. The overall fiscal impact is about $225,000. Shifting gears a bit, talking about the non-aligned group, similar to TAM, that group also saw minimal adjustments over a several year period. The wage rates for the non-aligned group were increased by 10% in FY24 and 5% in FY25. We've recently had success filling the positions, but to remain competitive, again, within the hyper-competitive labor market, we're recommending a 1.5% wage adjustment for the non-aligned group, that includes a 2% cost of living and a 1.5% market adjustment, so a combined 3.5% adjustment. The fiscal impact to the non-aligned wage group of employees is about $10,000. In the last group we want to discuss tonight, again, we're seeking proposed wage adjustments, is the 150 or so seasonal positions. As you all recall, we were far below market for several years, resulting in a lot of these positions, seasonal positions, going unfilled prior to last calendar year. We made a huge push, a 15% increase in retention bonuses for the beach positions. Were implemented a couple of years ago, a year ago in 2023, calendar year. We then, in calendar year 2024, increased wages by 3%. For a total increase received with no distinction between the cost of living and market adjustment. Madam Chair and Select Board, most of the positions were filled this year, as you've heard, by the Beach Committee Chair. We're really proud of that fact, but again, it speaks to the need periodically to make these adjustments so we're not falling behind. Most of the positions, again, were filled. For the lifeguard positions, we actually had more applications than positions available for the first time in several years. A 2% total increase is being recommended for calendar year 25, the upcoming calendar year, and again, continuing the practice of offering retention bonuses for beach staff. And those bonuses for beach staff are proposed to remain at $400 and $200 for parking attendants. And as you all probably recall, and I had to check with Peter on this, to be eligible for those bonuses, the retention bonuses, which has been a very successful strategy for us, the employees have to actually begin work the weekend following school vacation, commencement of school vacation, and then work through the weekend after Falmouth Road Race. So for that entire period, they have to be employees to be eligible for that retention bonus. But again, it's been a very successful strategy, and we found that it's been a great benefit in terms of filling those positions and keeping and retaining those folks beyond the road race in August. The proposed seasonal wage rates for calendar year 2025 include a 2% increase, which is comprised of both the cost of living adjustment and market combined. And the cost of the proposed increase to this seasonal group of employees is about $40,000. So, Madam Chair and Select Board, it's my office's recommendation that the Select Board approve these non-union wage rates as being presented, again, for the purpose of maintaining our competitiveness within the labor market and making sure that we don't have that whip effect where we're falling behind and having to catch up with significant increases down the road. So that's my recommendation. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Ms. Goldstone?
Am I remembering correctly that in some of the union negotiations, in addition to the wage rate increases, there were some step reclassifications? I'm just wondering in terms of the non-aligned and our non-union staff, making sure that equivalent positions that we actually have that internal equity that we're aiming for.
So yes, that's correct. For looking at TAM, for starters, we did both a market adjustment and a comprehensive classification review looking at that internal equity issue. That was part of what was implemented over the FY23, FY24 timeframe. So that has been recently done for TAM. For the seasonal positions, I guess that's not something I guess that's been studied closely, but we haven't seen anything. From time to time, we make an adjustment based on feedback from a department or an inability to fill a position. But we haven't seen anything on the seasonal or non-aligned that has sort of risen to create a concern in that regard.
Other questions? Mr. Brown?
It hadn't occurred to me earlier, but is there any need to consider this type of bonus system for other seasonal employees, like parks and so forth?
Yeah, we talked about that. There are some of the seasonal positions that we've had really good success with filling. There have been a couple in Public Works that have been more of a challenge. So it's certainly something that we could look at.
Just curious, has there been pushback from the staffs, feeling like maybe the beach is being treated specially or anything like that?
Haven't heard that, and as Peter said, it's something that we we look at from time to time, and certainly something we can revisit. I think there's other challenges in regards to some of the parks positions beyond, but we can certainly look at revisiting the retention bonuses and see if that has.
Curious if it's not a problem. I want to make it one.
Really good question. Any other questions from the board?
Madam Chair, we look for a motion.
I would entertain a motion.
A motion to vote to adopt the following wage rate adjustments. Number one, apply a 2% COLA and a 1.5% market adjustment to the technical, administrative, and management pay plan effective June 29th, 2025. Apply a 2% COLA and a 1.5 market adjustment to the non-aligned pay plan effective June 29th, 2025. Apply a 2% increase to the seasonal play plan, sorry. Effective December 29th, 2024. Somebody hurry up and second that, come on.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
I appreciate the,
Sorry about the typo, yes, it does.
appreciate you
For the
carrying on
audience
with
out there, that motion said play plan on it, so I.
It did say play plan.
I'll hear about it anyway.
All right, let's move on.
As
Consider
written.
approval of an application for a change of manager for an all-alcoholic beverage club license, Falmouth Yacht Club, located 290 Clinton Ave, Falmouth. Mr. Renshaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see the applicant, so I'll go ahead and kick this off and hopefully be able to answer any questions you might have. The Falmouth Yacht Club submitted the proper retail alcoholic beverages license application amendments, the change of manager form, which you have attached, back on August 30th of 2024. The proposed new manager's name is Mr. Michael Siku. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. The Falmouth Police Department, Fire Rescue Department, and our Health Department have all reviewed the application and have no objection to its approval, and the proposed new manager, I've been told, has successfully completed the required background check. So, Madam Chair and Select Board, it's my office's recommendation that the board approve the application for a change of manager of an all-alcoholic beverages club license, Falmouth Yacht Club, at 290 Clinton Avenue, Falmouth, as presented tonight.
I see that there's a tip certification. I guess my only question, and I wouldn't hold it up, but I would like it next time if the applicant were here. It seems interesting for us to change this without even seeing the applicant. I would entertain a motion or any discussion about this application.
Well, it's hard to keep up Doug Jones' tradition of looking at the person and saying, you understand you're responsible, right? I don't know.
I think it's important to do that.
He
quite
has
frankly.
been serving as manager in 2 Falmouth locations, so he's got a local history. I'm
Are you
not
making-
totally opposed to it, I guess.
Are you making a motion?
I would
Mr.
move
Brown?
approval,
Okay.
in spite of his absence.
Move to approve the application for a change of manager of an all-alcoholic beverages club license, Falmouth Yacht Club, located 290 Clinton Ave, Falmouth, as presented. So I have a motion.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay, so we have one opposed, 4 ayes, the motion carries.
You could have talked me out of it.
Okay,
Should
let's
have talked yourself out of it.
Let's move on. Consider submitting a letter of support to the U.S. Secretary of Transportation for the Cape Cod Bridges, Bourne Bridge funding. Mr. Renshaw, you have a draft of a letter to be sent?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. There is a copy of a draft letter in your package this evening. The U.S. Department of Transportation, as you all have probably read, has allocated about $1.7 billion in funding for Phase 1 of the Cape Cod Bridges program to replace the Sagamore Bridge. And this is in conjunction or coupled with $700 million in state funding. On September 25th of this year, the county commissioner submitted a letter of support for Phase 2 of the Cape Cod Bridges program, which involves the replacement of the Bourne Bridge. The Bourne Bridge, which, as you know, is owned and maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, serves as a gateway for over 250,000 Cape and Islands residents and millions of visitors each year. With over 35 million vehicle crossings every year, the Bourne Bridge is a critical asset for the economic health of the Cape and the surrounding communities. Applications were made in May and August of this year for a multimodal project discretionary grant and bridge investment program, respectively, and the total amount of funding being requested for Phase 2 of this project is on the same scale as of Phase 1, requesting over $1 billion. And this would be a significant step towards funding the replacement of the Bourne Bridge. And Madam Chair, as you indicated, a draft letter of support, very similar to that which was submitted by the Barnstable County Regional Board of Commissioners, is attached for the Select Board's consideration tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Renshaw. And I want to thank Mr. Muscali for helping with this as well. Any questions or comments about the letter?
All I'm going to say is I think we have to remain vigilant with respect to the Bourne Bridge. It's recently, I think, hit a hurdle with the funding at the state level, so I think it's really something that we need to keep on top of.
I just
Thank you.
wonder if we should, while we have this opportunity, should we add a paragraph to say that they should consider incorporating funding for an additional rail spur if they are interested in the rail-to-trail option? I mean, because if it's not in this budget, it's probably never gonna happen, and then the Rail 2 trail will never happen, which, I mean, ultimately, that would be the best result, but I don't wanna see us give up the rail without a new rail in place. If we don't ask, we probably won't ever see it.
Personally, I kind of think it takes away from the intent of this letter, the spearheaded letter that Bob suggested. I mean, personally, that's how, I don't want to convolute our intent with that.
I guess I feel the same way. I think it's an important project, but this, if anything, my only, I won't hold it up because of this, but my only critique would be that we need to make the case really strongly for the Bourne Bridge and for having that second bridge there specifically. I feel like some of the statistics in here kind of make a general case for having the bridges, and I think we just need to be really careful that we do make the case very strongly for the Bourne Bridge and Phase 2 of this. And while I support the project you're talking about, Doug, I just think too many eggs in one basket. If we want to consider a separate, letter of support for that, but.
Okay.
So what's the consensus of the board?
I think it's a good idea to remind them that it's something that we're still expecting to get done.
I'd certainly make a motion that the letter of support to the U.S. Secretary of Transportation for Cape Cod Bridges, Bourne Bridge funding be submitted to the Secretary of Transportation as drafted by Mr. Renshaw.
Madam Chair, I'll second Mr. Muscali's motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to support. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. I'm going to move into the consent agenda. I will read each item of the consent agenda. If any board member would like to hold anything on the consent agenda, please notify me as the chair. Licenses, consider approval of an application for three special one-day all alcoholic beverage license, Falmouth Theater Guild, Highfield Theater, 58 Highfield Drive, November 8th through 10th, 15th through 17th, 22nd through 24th, Friday and Saturday, November 8, 9, 15, 16, 22, 23, from 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m., Sunday, November 10, 17, and 24, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Consider approval of an application for a special one-day wine and malt license, Exit Cape Realty, Spread Joy, Give Generously, Exit Cape Realty Office, 660 North Falmouth Highway, Sunday, November 17, 2024, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m.
I'm the next one. I'm gonna just want to record my vote as abstention on C.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. C, consider approval of the resubmission of an application filed by the Falmouth Elks Lodge, number 2380 BPOE of USA, Inc., 140 Palmer Ave, Falmouth, for a change of officers, directors to its all alcoholic beverages nonprofit club license. Okay, administrative orders, consider request to accept a donation from Rockland Trust in the amount of $500 to go towards the purchase of a mascot costume for the Falmouth Police Department.
Can we hold that one? I have one question about that.
That's a hold. Consider request to accept a donation from the Rotary Club of Falmouth, Cape Cod, in the amount of $3,000 to go towards the purchase of a drone for the Falmouth Police Department. Consider the request from the Falmouth Police Department Community Engagement Team to expend $1,343 of the funds remaining from a DARE grant. Number 4, consider request from the Fire Rescue Department to accept a donation from the family of the late Dr. Evan Weinstein in the amount of $20,000 and a donation from the Falmouth Road Race in the amount of $8,946 to support the purchase of custom street-ready registered medical cart.
Madam Chair, I'll move the consent agenda with the exception of admin order A at Ms. Goldstone's request and the abstention by Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, for licenses number
Elks.
C.
Elks Lodge, right.
Okay, so I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna go back to administrative orders, A. Ms. Goldstone.
Yep, my question is, as I understand it, this is a $5,000+ mascot costume. They've got a $500 grant. Does the remaining 4,500 or so, is that coming from the town, from other grants? What's the funding plan for the remainder of that?
The mascot is $5,000.
The costume for the mascot? That's a great question, and I don't think I have a great answer for you tonight. They are planning on applying this $500 grant. I don't know if the balance is going to be made up of funding that they have available in a line, or if it's going to be another grant. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer for that tonight.
If I may, and I only with, I guess, a similar question, and maybe I should have thought of it before, but a similar question with respect to the drone and the police department, because I'm sure the drone is more than $3,000. I just in the similar vein with respect to the drone and the police department and acceptance of the grant from the Rotary Club. I'm just curious how the rest of it is going to be paid for, because I know.
Yeah. So Peter suggested, I think this is actually the police department's plan. So this action is just getting select board's approval to accept this grant. It's the beginning of the plan. So PD has some additional donation campaigning to do, perhaps. So this begins that process. The $500
Step of the process.
towards the $500 towards the $5,000 McGruff costume. This begins that process, and then the drone program. I know Chief Laurie has indicated he already has some staff that have been identified as kind of the participants in that program. They'll start trying to procure some additional grant funding and perhaps some town funding going forward to get that program off the ground.
For the record, I'm a member of the Rotary Club, but I don't think that impacts my vote whatsoever.
Okay. So we have already approved the purchase of the drone piece. Is that okay, Mr. Muscali?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go back to Administrative Order A. How does the board want to proceed?
Want to unlock it?
I'm in favor of it.
No, it was her
So this is
home.
yeah, I guess, my concern is if approving the 500 puts us on the hook for the remaining 4,500.
They may have
but if
they may
yeah.
have budgetary provisions for that already with,
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson-Staub.
Yeah, I just wanted to, on that point, the board is not making a commitment to acquire anything. With a vote to accept a donation, all you're doing is literally accepting a donation. It's a state law. The town cannot receive donated funds without a vote of the board. So in the event that two scenarios. One, the police department comes forward and says, we want $5,500 or $4,500 for a costume from town funds. The board could say, we don't support putting that on the town meeting warrant, or the finance committee could do that. So it's not a commitment to the costume.
Great.
If it was in the form of a grant, maybe, it might be some strings attached, right?
Okay.
What's the pleasure of the board on Administrative Orders A?
I'll move A.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, unanimous.
I'd just like to mention appreciation to the Evan Weinstein family for the $20,000 donation and the road race for the $8,946 for the purchase of that medical cart.
That's awesome.
That thing, it looks like a ambulance on
pretty cool.
wheels.
Maybe that's the future.
Yeah, for the road
Okay,
race.
we're going to move on to the minutes. Did everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes of meetings, public session, June 3rd, 2024?
Yes, but I can't remember if it was accurate.
Did you see anything
glaring,
you wanted to change or amend?
No.
No.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll move the minutes of June 3rd, 2024.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of meetings, public session, June 3rd, 2024. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approve the minutes. Mr. Renshaw, do you have a supplemental report for us?
Just one quick update for the board and the community. Dr. Betsy Gladfelter in the Conservation Office, wanted me to remind the community that construction on the Upper Coonamessett River Wetlands Restoration Project is going to begin in about a month and a half, 2 months. And the staging site located at 170 Hatchville Road is going to be closed once construction begins for about 6 to 8 months. As you all know, the restoration of the upper Coonamessett River follows the lower restoration, which was completed in 2020. Goals are identical: to improve natural habitats, increase resiliency to climate change, and to improve overall public access. The current project that's proposed is going to result in about 18.5 acres of restored floodplain and over 4,000 linear feet, or almost a mile, of improved stream channel. It's going to improve fish passage for herring and eel and open up more cold water fishery habitat for brook trout. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
That's exciting.
Thank you. Really exciting. And thank you to Betsy Gladfelder.
We'll be
for-
posting something
for
on the
all of her
website too
work.
with a little bit more detail. So the public, she wanted me to make sure that the public was aware of the closure in about a month and a half, 2 months.
Awesome.
By the time she's done, we'll have to rename the whole river.
Okay, select board reports. I have a quick one. I just want to remind the select board members that we have a workshop coming up on December 7th. Please make sure that's in your calendars. And also, because no one signed up for the evaluation subcommittee, I'll be leading up that effort, and I've been working with Mr. Renshaw on some goals to add to our tool that we use to evaluate him.
Do we have any idea as to when that December 7th meeting's going to start, or when it's going to run from?
I am-
know you're still working on it,
But I'm going to guess it's going to be a 9 to 12, 9 to 1.
but not, it's starting at 9 in any event, whether it
Unless,
goes to 12 or-
unless anybody wants to start, I'd rather start at 6 in the morning, because
Yeah,
I'm a morning
I'm up.
person. But if anybody wants to start earlier, I'm more than happy to do that. It's up to
I'd be
you.
fine with 8 o'clock, too.
Me too.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
Ms. Goldstone?
Eight's
Okay,
good.
so we will look, let's shoot for 8 to 12, but I'm going to get back to our presenter, and we may be modifying
Sure.
that. But 8 o'clock is great. That's it for me. Anyone else?
Select Board Member Brown and myself both attended the Eversource Grid Modernization Plan presentation at the library last week. A lot of really good information, noting that the main pressures on the grid here on the Cape are the expansion of distributed renewable energy production, as well as wind damage to our grid. It was also particularly interesting to note they have a 10-year plan for modernization, but they noted that with the full build-out of that plan, which is ambitious, it only gets us somewhere between 50 to 70% of the way to the state's climate goals. So there's still a big gap that they're trying to figure out how to meet.
I found it interesting also that the Eversource engineer pointed out that it might be wise to be a little less ambitious with the electric modernization goals, and maybe continue to incorporate a little bit of the gas production and use of gas to reduce the challenge of readiness. And in my own personal experience, I know that I found that my customers who want to go all green and go all electric spend an awful lot of money on electric bills with their heat pumps in the winter. So I've been recommending going with the hybrid and keeping the gas back up on the system. It just seems more effective, more efficient. You only need one system instead of two in most cases. I think we need to maybe advocate for that. It'd be great if people could get the rebate without having to go to the extreme. Because, I have customers that spent $60,000 on solar panels and $80,000 on 2 heating systems, thinking they're doing the right thing, and then they got a $1,000 bill for electric in the winter. So doesn't seem to make sense. Anyway, I thought it was interesting that they had identified that same concern. And also attended are you finished? I'll just keep talking for a minute. I went to the Falmouth Housing Trust annual meeting, and it was great to see that they're getting so popular with their annual meeting that they had outgrown the Woods Hole Country Club, and went to the Coonamessett Inn, and the room was pretty full. So it's great. They're very successful. It's nice.
I've been attending regularly the meetings of the 250 Committee, which is in place to celebrate the upcoming 250th anniversary of the start of the Revolutionary War in 1775 and the Declaration of Independence 1776. Mission statement has been approved, I believe. A banner is recommended, so they're a little late in getting started, but I think the committee is catching up quickly, so.
One last thing, and
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
I want to recognize town council and planning staff for also attending the Eversource meeting. keep abreast of what's happening. And there's one more thing I have. On Friday, we're having the Cape Annapolis Municipal Leaders Breakfast at the Seacrest. It's really easy to get to. And we got.
Already signed up.
We're overbooked. We got more seats if you gentlemen want to make it. It's a great breakfast. Sheriff Buckley will be there to talk about her new programs.
Maybe also mention Veterans Day and the celebrations that are going to be going on at the library on November 11th.
Right.
I spent an hour and a half with the police chief last week and did a ride around with the police chief. Did a tour of the new training facility in the industrial park, and he was gracious enough to set me up with a Veterans Day. I'll be rolling with the patrol division for the entire day, so I'm looking forward to that. But I wanted to thank town manager for setting up a tour with the police chief and getting to know him a little better, and that's it.
Sounds fun.
Yep.
And we have our next meeting, we have town meeting, and then we have our meeting before town meeting. So just a reminder to everyone at the Lawrence School, and we'll have a room assignment.
How's that facility coming along? It's a little behind schedule on the construction?
Pretty impressive, though. The place was full of activity, and it's state-of-the-art. Parking's gonna be a little challenging for all the things they're gonna do, but I would encourage, if you got a chance to go tour it.
I think they moved their date back to like later January now.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Anything else from the board? Mr. Muscally, would you like to motion to adjourn?
Absolutely, I make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.